Greetings and good evening. Welcome to another Cleveland Public Library, the Next 400 digital discussion. Chris Tanaka from 19 News, serving as your moderator once again. Tonight we're speaking about a beautiful tapestry of a community in Cleveland, Hough, set against the Hough Uprising, which happened 55 years ago this week. I'm joined by two legendary individuals who have fought for and continue to fight for their communities in Cleveland. Mansfield Frazier, you know him as the Executive Director of Neighborhood Solutions. He also had the vision to bring Chateau Hough to life, the urban winery, which is thriving to this day. And Don Freeman, whose roots in the civil rights movement go back to the beginning. He's a noted author, activist, writer, and teacher. Gentlemen, greetings to both of you, and thank you so much for joining us for this important discussion.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Guys, I want to start by going back and talking about Hough as a community years, even decades ago, to give our watchers tonight a context into what it was prior to what it is and what we hope it will be. Mansfield, you are a historian of the neighborhood. You've been there, you live there, you cultivate it as you cultivate the wine. Give us your take on what Hough was so many decades ago.
Well, actually, you have to go back to the decades after the Civil War. What happened was that millionaires like Rockefellers, the Hannas, the Wades, they built homes along Euclid Avenue from about 26th Street out to 86th Street. But the people, the wealthy merchants who couldn't afford to build a mansion, they built in the next community over, which was Hough. And they built some very large, beautiful homes. And it stayed a very stable middle-class community until World War II started. Now, Cleveland had a lot of munition plants, and they needed workers who came from West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee. They all came up to work in the war effort. And housing was so short, there's tales of people renting out pup tents, sleeping in backyards.
Wow.
So what these merchants did, they built them homes out in the heights for their families, and they cut these big houses up into rooming houses, which brought them more income. After World War II, a lot of the Appalachians moved back to their where they came from. A lot of them stayed. So Hough was a white working class community from the end of the war up until the late 50s. What happened was John Kennedy started urban renewal. And the central area where I was living at the time was one of the areas they wanted to renew. So the people, they did it poorly, actually. They didn't provide any guidance, any assistance for the people moving. They said, well, you gotta leave here. We don't know where you're going. So a lot of the people from the central neighborhood moved into Hough because it was the next community over. So what you had was working class blacks and working class whites, and the density was just through the roof. So when the civil rights movement came along, you have to remember that the decade from the mid 60s, when the Hough Uprising took place, to the mid 70s, there were over 700 uprisings in Black communities across the United States. 700, both large and small. So this was a powder keg just waiting to explode. And there was a bar on 79th and Hough, the 79er, where a Black man went in and tried to get a glass of water and was kind of roughly ejected. But to my way of thinking, that one incident just started something that was bound to happen anyway.
Yeah, it was the spark that lit the conflagration. Of course, the uprising that we're speaking of, July 18th through the 23rd of 1966. Don, you grew up in, and you're a Glenville guy, but you were right there when the Hough Uprising happened. What do you remember? How do you describe it to people who don't know much about what happened in the streets, in the neighborhood back then, all those years ago?
Well, I think what I would add to what Mansfield has already indicated is that by the time of the uprising, Hough had become an area, and I want to especially talk about the portion of Hough from 73rd, Hough Avenue, from East 73rd to East 79th on the north side of Hough, which was called Little Hollywood. In that area, you had large apartments that had been compartmentalized into smaller units where the owners of those apartments could super exploit the tenants who occupied those smaller units in terms of the cost of rent in those apartments. Also, you had in that area, that congested area in terms of Hough, the Hough neighborhood, it had become by 1961 the largest, well, I'm referring to Addison Junior High, which was located at 79th and Hough, had become the largest junior high school in the state of Ohio by the fall of 1961, when I started teaching in the Cleveland City School District at Kennard High School, which was located in the central area. So the less said, the better in terms of the deteriorating and degenerating quality and declining quality of education and schooling that was occurring at Addison Junior High School. Also, there weren't enough elementary schools in the Hough area at that time. In fact, there were two elementary schools primarily. Dunham Elementary School, located at 66 in Lexington in the western or lower part of Hough, and Hough Elementary School, which was located in the upper or eastern part of Hough. This situation was so bad in terms of overcrowding and congestion that at Dunham Elementary School, the students could not attend school for a full and entire day in terms of both the morning and the afternoon. They either had to attend in the morning or in the afternoon.
Wow.
And this situation continued until the late 1960s after the Hough Rebellion, when more elementary schools were built in the Hough area. Also, you had throughout, you had merchants who had grocery stores that were not selling quality food to their customers, and they were essentially charging high prices. So that what was occurring was super exploitation of the population of Hough, which obviously resulted in July 18th. I think that was a Monday, July 18th, were in conjunction with the incident at the 79er Cafe on East 79th Street, near the corner of East 79th and Hough, whereas Mansfield had indicated an African American was not denied water and basically was removed, not generally, from that particular bar or cafe. That was so indicated and reported to the residents in the area surrounding the cafe. And at a certain point that evening, they said enough is enough, and essentially started throwing bottles and bricks. And about 79 police initially entered, and of course they were pummeled with the bricks and bottles, and fires started, and same thing happened to firemen. And then later, about 300 additional police were added. And that night, a woman named Joyce Arnett was shot in the head by an unidentified gunman when she stepped her head out of a window of one of the apartments. So this was the situation that essentially erupted the first evening and night of January the 18th. And then July the 19th, Ralph Locher asked Governor Rhodes to send guardsmen, National Guard, to the Hough area. And they didn't, he had asked for about 1,500 National Guards. And around 11 o'clock, the night of July the 19th, about 275 National Guards arrived. And that night, another person was murdered in terms of a man named Percy Giles. He was about 36 years old. And Joyce Arnett, who had been murdered the night before, she was about 26. So Percy Giles was murdered that the night of the 19th on at Huff around East 86th Street. He was murdered. And then additional National Guardsmen arrived. Then, in terms of July the 20th, by that time, there had been 53 African Americans arrested first night, the 18th.
Hey, Don.
Teenagers, and about 60 were arrested the next night.
Yeah. Don, let me interrupt for one second.
The 19th.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second and get Mansfield in here. Mansfield, Dawn said the arrival of all of these guard troops to maintain order, whatever it may be. In my mind, that's really just pouring gasoline on a fire. Is it not?
Yes, it exacerbated the situation. Initially it didn't calm it down. It actually made it worse.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of pent-up anger in the neighborhood. What had happened, we had the 1963 Civil Rights Bill, and people thought things would change, that we wouldn't have stores that sold substandard meats or vegetables. And by 1966, which isn't a very long period of time, people probably should have been a little bit more patient, there was a lot of anger across the United States. So Cleveland wasn't that much different than a lot of other communities in having this pent-up anger that was about to explode.
Here's what, when we talk about this from a historical perspective and we look back at everything that led to this event, one question I have is perhaps rhetorically, is what's changed? I mean, it seems like Black and minority communities are still dealing with a lot of these central issues that happened all those years ago. Is that a fair observation? Where are we right now as it relates to where we were then?
Well, go ahead.
Mansfield, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
That's a fairly accurate observation. We have Blacks have more jobs in more industries. The poverty isn't as grinding, but there still are people that are left out of the mainstream. But a lot has changed, and a lot still needs to be changed. Put it that way.
Yeah, Don.
One comment that I want to make in terms of negative change is that there has been the element of gentrification that has asserted itself, especially in the eastern or upper part of which, how should I say, Cleveland Clinic impinges upon, especially, let's say, along Chester Avenue. So there has been the element of gentrification that has asserted itself, especially in Eastern Hub.
Well,
yeah, you can't ignore the clinic. You can't pretend that away, and right. What it brings, being a neighbor, being right on the border. How do you uplift? Many people will say, well, you got to build new houses, you got to build new industry to lift up a neighborhood. How does Hough maintain its community, its residents, its DNA, its soul, while keeping gentrification at bay?
Well,
Go, Mansfield.
there's a newly formed Hough Community Land Trust that our councilman asked us to start, and we're just getting our legs up under us. But the purpose of that is to fight off gentrification, and we have a game plan for doing it. Hough is a big enough community to accommodate Cleveland Clinic and to accommodate our residents. Our goal is to make sure that our residents are accommodated. The bigger issue is not so much the clinic, it's the developers that want to come into Hough now. Our nonprofit owns a house over on 65th that we bought because it abuts a property that we need to expand our winery. So we bought it about 7-8 years ago, just sitting on it. And it's dilapidated, it's a tear down. Over the last year and a half or two, I get a card or a call every week from some developer, some investor wanting to buy that. So yes, developers are interested in Hough, and if they come with a legitimate offer that also takes care of the needs of our residents, we don't mind them putting up $400,000 condos, but they have to realize that we might want to build permanent supportive housing for the homeless right next door. And they can't stop that. So our goal is to make sure that our elderly citizens, we have a plan of making developers pony up money in case the taxes on our elderly go up because of their development, that they assist in the taxes.
Wow.
It's very well thought out, and we're going to control the land in Hough. We have a plan we're working on.
Do you have, you've got the plan, do you have the support? Is there enough willpower within the community and the financial means to be had to accomplish the goals?
Yes. We have the ear of our councilman, and we have the ear of folks at City Hall. So when a developer wants to build a project, I'm talking about commercial projects, they have to, it's already taken place on Hough and not Addison, Hough and Crawford. There's a new apartment building just went up. They paid the land trust $25,000 in cash, and they will pay every year, and they don't own the land. We still own the land. They get a 99-year lease.
Okay.
Land trust will own the land. So we have experts from around the country that are kind of walking us through the process of how to build an effective land trust. We know Hough is a hot community right now. The Cleveland Foundation is building their headquarters on 66 in Euclid. You go 3 blocks north, there's a new Hough Library going up. Go another block, there's the Allen Estates going up. These are going to be market rate homes. So we know it's a hot community. And like I said, the fact that I get all of these inquiries invited me to sell this dilapidated house, we know investors are interested.
Yeah. Don, moving forward, there's interest in Hough, there's development, there's oversight from the land trust. what else is needed for a community to really reach its potential beyond brick and mortar projects? And maybe, you know, as an author and a teacher, it might be something about inspiring youth. I don't know. What else is needed? What's that, you know, what's less concrete, but just as important when you're talking about a community reaching its potential?
Well, I would have to emphasize the quality of education in the schools that are still in up definitely needs to be improved.
Yeah.
It's definitely inadequate in terms of quality of education in schools. Also, another aspect or factor that I want to comment on is that there's a need for retail establishments such as drugstores and even more, let's say, quality grocery stores in the hub area. There's really just one, let's say, grocery store of any size in terms of the Huff area now, and that's Save-A-Lot. It's located on Superior Avenue, just east of Superior and Addison. There are two other smaller grocery stores, one located at East 89th in Superior, and another located at East 89th and Huff. But there are definitely not enough retail establishments in the up area, along with laundromats. It's basically laundromat about 65th and Superior. But again, there are not enough retail establishments for the residents in Huff.
Don, I'll have to take exception. You're forgetting Dave's beautiful new store on 61st and Chester. That's
Okay,
in
you're
Huff.
considering that part of Huff.
Oh, absolutely, it's in Huff.
Okay,
All the way to
I didn't consider that part of Huff, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and then there's Aldi's that sits right on the line of Huff. That's at 73rd and Euclid, and that's the dividing line. And then there's the supermarket at Church Square. All of those are 100,000 square feet or better stores.
Okay, those are areas sort of on the fringes of Huff that I didn't necessarily consider to be part of the Huff area proper, but I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, and look, Dave's has only been there for a few years now. I remember celebrating its opening. So it's at once a success, Mansfield, that you allude to, as far as being able to provide better produce, better meats, better access, better nutrition, and healthcare, health outcomes for people in the neighborhood. But it wasn't until a couple of years ago that it was there. Kind of a double-edged sword, right? It's a success, but my gosh, took long enough.
Yeah, and sometimes change takes longer than you would like for it to.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about change. Let's talk about moving forward. Mansfield, you talk about the land trust. Don, you talk about education. What must happen in the next 5 years and 10 years to make sure that the positive growth within the community not only continues, but accelerates?
Well, I'll make a comment. It can't happen without quality schools.
Yeah.
There are people who live in the Huff area in various apartments, such as Lexington Village, which is located in the area where Little Hollywood used to be located, that if they have children, they send them to private schools. They don't allow them to go to the schools in Huff. So if you want a growing population in Huff, you're going to have to improve the quality of schools because people will not live in the Huff area who have school-age children, and because they don't want to go into the Cleveland public schools, given the quality of schooling in the Cleveland public schools.
Well, I think that we have to attract more young families, new homeowners. And for years, I was against charter schools, but I've kind of changed my tune over the years. There are some quality charter schools that I'm thinking of the one on 36th Street off Superior, the John Zitner runs. I can understand a parent not wanting to send their child to a substandard school.
Sure.
But sometimes you have to know how much you can bite off and chew. You can't improve the schools in Huff without improving the schools throughout the city. You can't just pluck Huff out of a bad school system and make their public schools better without doing the whole system.
Yeah.
But I agree the whole system needs to be improved.
Do you think, and this is a philosophical question for you, Mansfield, do you think that developers who want to come into the community could be compelled to build new schools with certain developments? Is that a realistic discussion to have? Because it's a playbook that's been utilized in several communities in several states across the country, that developers, if they want to, slap down a row of new homes, they've got to make sure there's a new school at the end of the block. Do you think that's a possibility? Is that responsible growth for the community to bridge a gap in what it doesn't have to what it needs?
Well, it certainly sounds like a compelling idea. It's something I'm not aware of, but it's certainly something that I would like to investigate, because here's the thing: when the developers were putting all their money downtown, and the people on the west side and east side were complaining to City Hall, all the developer money is going downtown. I said, no, I'm not going to complain. Let them keep putting their money downtown. You know why? They're going to run out of buildings to invest in. And when they run out of investment opportunities downtown, then they will turn toward the neighborhoods. And that's what we see starting to happen in Huff. So I could take that back to our Huff Community Land Trust and run it up the pole. Like for you to send me more information about it, where it's been done.
Well, yeah.
Now on your research.
Absolutely. And of course, one thing it does involve is scale, right?
Yeah.
If we're getting in the weeds here about finances, the developer has to have a certain amount of land, certain amount of parcels that it can turn a profit on in order to take the loss on constructing a school. But by all means, yeah, that's an offline conversation we can have, and who knows what fruit it can bear. But
I'd love to have it. We're in Huff, we're ripe for that kind of conversation.
Yeah, for sure. My goodness. Well, gentlemen, look, we've been talking for about 40 minutes now, and the conversation, I feel like, is only just going. Of course, you can always find, for our viewers out there, more resources with the Cleveland Public Library at all the branches, online as well. And for 19 News, all of our stories that we do, including last Friday's with Mr. Harry Boomer, in which Mansfield appeared talking about the revitalization of Huff, always online at cleveland19.com. I want to read a comment from a Facebook viewer. Natoya Walker Minor says, historians, thank you for your service and sacrifice. We stand on the shoulders of greatness. She says that to both of you men.
I'll send her a check in the mail.
I want to extend my thanks to both of you for making time. Again, Don Freeman, an author, an activist, a teacher, an educator, and inspirer. Thank you, Don, for stopping by in Mansfield. Your continued efforts to raise up Hough are not only well known, but they are so deeply appreciated. Gentlemen, for everyone on behalf of the Cleveland Public Library and here at 19 News, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And thank you for joining us for this Cleveland Public Library, the Next 400 digital discussion.